So Ty, you've studied user experience as an actual discipline. Maybe tell us how we go about creating the best user experience in the industry here at Alkami.
What's critical in creating a great user experience is bringing in the user early in the process. It's really important that we understand how they see the experience, how they engage with the interface and whatnot. And so it's really important to understand that perspective and make sure that we're early when it comes to understanding the user. But what we also notice is that what users say, think, do, and feel are sometimes four totally different things. And our researchers haven't really sussed that out, if you will. I think that's the most critical part of creating a great user experience.
You use the word sus, and so I want to get to that in just a second as well. So, I mean, a lot of times I think there's this misconception that user experience is just this really subjective kind of beauty is in the eye of the beholder type thing. And maybe financial institutions think, hey, this is really just all opinion. It's more art, not really science. And so maybe dig into that a little bit. Like, what's the scientific method that we use to ensure a great user experience?
Yeah, so beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but at the same time, there is a scientific part of all of this, right?
Okay.
And so the way people process visual information on the screen, there's a lot of similarities and we see patterns in that. And so it's important that we take a very scientific approach and measure it from a qualitative and quantitative perspective. But from a quantitative perspective, we rely on UX metrics. And there are many out there, but one that we rely on in particular is our SUS, and it stands for System Usability Scale. And SUS is essentially a survey that is administered at the end of each usability test. And what's important about the SUS score is that it's not an Alkami metric, but it's an industry-wide metric. So we're not able to change the definition of those questions in that score. So if you have another organization or team that's conducting that same survey, the questions are absolutely the same.
But Ty, we're all accustomed to both good and bad user experiences really in our daily lives. But I think it's especially important when it comes to banking. And so maybe tell us about how we think about that a little bit at Alkami.
Yeah, absolutely. User experience when it comes to banking, I would say is one of the most critical areas. And that's because it's centered around one's finances. And finances are deeply embedded into our lives in many ways and facets. And so what happens is when a user is engaging in digital banking, there's a level of anxiety. When the user sees that loading screen and those accounts are loading, there's an expectation that they're looking for when that page loads, right? And so there's a level of anxiety. And a great user experience has the ability to reduce the user's cognitive load. And when I say cognitive load, that's essentially the processing power. And the processing power that's going on with the user is what they're seeing and how they're processing it. And how can we make them process that seamlessly, quicker, and more concise manner. And so having the ability to use design principles, best practices, and user data to reduce the cognitive load of the user is one critical reason why, it's important to have a great user experience in digital banking.
Something else that comes down to really the outcomes and the bottom line is if we deliver a bad user experience, you roll out a new version of the app or a new version of the online system, and all of a sudden the call center blows up because people don't understand it and they don't want to make a mistake. I mean, that affects the bottom line of our customers too. I mean, so user experience is not just about feelings. It actually affects, your profitability.
Yeah, absolutely. So user experience is really balancing the needs of the user and the business. A lot of times when we think about user experience, we just think about the end user, but it's really molding and bringing that digital relationship together and creating the ability for everyone needs to be met. Users want to feel like they want you to make their life easier, simple, while, financial institutions are looking for opportunities to drive engagement, open up new accounts and things like that. And so you're really the glue in between those two and facilitating that conversation.
Yeah, a banker, credit union employees don't want to spend their time on the phone apologizing for why something's confusing in the self-service tool that they'd rather spend that time talking about a person's financial needs and things like that. And so I know we hear that, from prospective customers that come over is that I can spend more of my time actually building a relationship and not trying to teach someone how to use the app. Well, Ty, obviously this is fantastic, this background. Like what's coming down the road? Like, what are you excited about next?
There's two things I'm excited about. One is going to be really focusing on personalization and the experience. Users are starting to build a mental model. They're starting to build a hard expectation of what digital banking is today. And what we're seeing right now is that they're checking their balance, making a transfer, and they're starting to sometimes exit the experience in some cases. What we want to do is drive more engagement. And so I have a strong conviction around, based off the data, a strong conviction around making the experience feel like it belongs to the user. A lot of times when we look at the research and studies, we find that users are actually looking at ads and going, "I don't like that." Actually, tests score uh, less favorable when you have ads with photos, and so it starts to make the user feel like those ads are not for them. I've heard users say, "This is not my content. This is not about me." And so hyper personalization and leveraging data, I think, is going to allow users to start to lean in a bit more and use the application in a different way, a more intimate way. And when you're engaging the user by calling them by their name and recommending solutions to them based off of their financial goals and their behaviors in the platform, then they're going to start to pay more attention to those insights and offers that show up. So I'm really excited about that. The other thing I'm really excited about is, when I think of digital banking, I think there's three key pillars, especially on the retail side. There's the digital banking that we offer today, making a transfer, checking your balance, right? The second one is the onboarding and product adoption. I think that's the second vertical. And I think we do that well as well today. But the third one is really diving into service center. And you mentioned this before, building a service center that makes that three-legged, experience holistic. Because we're finding more and more that when you surface these three things in experience, when the user lands on the page, that the user feels like they have all three things that they need as if they walked into a branch.
Well, Ty, thanks so much for stopping by. Really great to speak with you, and I'm really excited about what we're doing here at Alkami around user experience.
Thanks, Stephen.
All right.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.